Do you believe that collective healing of physical and social and moral trauma is possible? Do you believe it's possible? I mean, how can we think about trauma as a collective experience expressed through all of our social constructs and our networks? Or how can we hope for collective healing in a very complex mixture of relationships in the ways in which we interact with systems and institutions and structures? I'm Laurie Garrett-Cobbina. I'm Associate Professor at the University of Redlands Graduate School of Theology, and I'm the Director of the Shaw Chaplaincy Institute. And I'd like to talk to you about phase 3 of spiritual response to trauma, which is what is the long-term goal of trauma care? So, one question to think about is how trauma is a collective experience. And also to think about how have religion and other political collectives done on this issue of justice, done on issues of racism and influenced how we do healthcare, especially since we have structures that advantage some and disadvantage others. So some of the things to think about in long-term trauma care are engaging systems and political systems. In phase 3, people who are traumatized, they're grieving, they almost always need to consider how to reorganize, some aspect of their lives in the aftermath of loss and devastation. These are the kind of questions you might hear from people in phase 3. How do I want to live my life? How can we recover from this? Where do we go from here? These questions really form the basis of spiritual life, and they form the basis of communal life and moral life. I've talked previously about COVID-19 being a traumatic event and trauma being defined as a crisis of meaning. I've talked about COVID-19 and systematic racism as separate but interrelated traumas. Both are a threat to safety, they're a threat to life, and they have added complexity upon what is already complex social system and network of social relationships. Now, the trauma of COVID-19 is layered within the systemic racism, and it presents not only emotional shock that has enduring effects that overwhelm normative ways of coping, it also encompasses a crisis of meaning that presents concern over continued threats to life, body, emotion, and spiritual well-being. Just quickly to review, phase 1 of spiritual response to trauma is the immediate spiritual care that's in response to the traumatic event itself. And it focuses on restoring physical safety, and it also soul care. And phase 2 of trauma care was this sort of going into the wilderness of the soul, where we sort of engage people's feelings. Their feelings become expressed, and they tell their stories, and they begin to create narratives about what happened and what's going to happen. So today we're going to talk about the spiritual care response to people working in phase 3 of trauma care. And that this part challenges us because we face this truth that safety has not really been established, either COVID-19 or systemic racism, especially safety for vulnerable populations. So then ongoing experiences of trauma, such as trauma from racism, becomes truly, truly untenable. And in phase 3, it's challenging to plan when there is still a lack of clarity, a lack of safety, and there's still social forces that create violence in our communities and continue to target certain populations. So it's hard to do ongoing planning when there still continues to be sort of a threat to our lives. So to help all of us anticipate and prepare for what is to come, One thing we could have to do as spiritual care providers is normalize reactions that people are having. That is their anger, fear, even resistance to change and challenges to the status quo, and the hope for real transformation that's being born out of this this great big morass of trauma. There's being born this desire to transform society and empower society to live according to its moral values. So expect for people to seek and really need spiritual recovery and restoration. And you may begin to see what we call post-traumatic growth. That is a positive change that can follow traumatic events. However, it is important to realize that positive change may not feel positive to those advantaged by the current social constructs. So, post-traumatic growth is possible. And in helping the growth happen, you have to hear the stories. You have to work to transform community and integrate spirituality of hope into the narrative so that the hope is not based on some kind of fantasy, but based on clarity and truth of what really the challenges are. There's a need for creativity and a greater appreciation of life. There's this place where you can accept new possibilities and also to develop one's spiritual maturity. The commitment to work for social justice and pressure political systems and structures to do justice, love kindness, and listen with humility is imperative. Otherwise, transformation in that spiritual force, it won't happen. As shock waves wear off, the initial pain from the trauma actually grows and intensifies. This is where people need to be connected to their spiritual vitality, that's grounded in their spirituality, in order to use that grounding to power the community to create a moral and behavioral goodness in society. So Isaiah, in Isaiah 43, asks this question: do you perceive anything new? Isaiah says that God is telling us, I'm creating something new. There it is. Do you see it? We have this opportunity in phase 3 to create something new. And every generation is tasked with creating that new thing in the world today. So the overall goal of phase 3 is to create something new based on the narratives that come out of the trauma. Martin Luther King said that, after all, if the arc of the moral universe will inevitably bend toward justice, there is every reason for us to do our part to move that arc toward justice. That is the task of phase 3, and I hope this will be helpful to you as we continue to go through this time of trauma with COVID-19, the transformation that we are seeing and hoping for in our society, where we'll create a more just society and a more safe society, a society that values every person's life. And we have this unique opportunity right now, out of these depths of our grief and our loss, to do something new. Let's not miss this opportunity to do that. Thank you.